Don Williams ended a call with Mutual Marriage Insurance, a mysterious company he learned was set up by a man-hating lawyer that forced gullible wives to pay $1,600 for insurance supposedly designed to preserve marriages and fidelity. He made an appointment for Wednesday morning, less than 48 hours later. He picked up the phone and called Oscar Warren, the federal agent whose wife, Renee, had talked his wife into taking part in the supposed spa weekend. However, this was just a cover. In fact, Renee Warren and 3 other women spent the weekend devising punishments for their spouses in case they cheated. Renee ended up in prison after trying to kill her husband, Oscar, and another wife, Madison Johnson, received a death sentence after killing her husband, Dave. Don only knew what the media reported, but what he learned from Oscar and Evelyn shook him to his core. "Everything is ready," Don said to Oscar. "My meeting is scheduled for 8:30 am on Wednesday." "Okay," Oscar replied. "Let's meet tomorrow at noon in your office. I'll tell you what to expect and prepare you." "Okay," Don said. "Do we need a cone of silence or something like that for this?" he added, trying to add some humor to the situation. Oscar laughed. "No, the cone of silence is not needed, but I'm sure you understand the seriousness of the situation." "Don't say anything to your wife yet," Oscar said. "I won't," Don replied. "See you tomorrow," he added, ending the conversation. Don looked at the family photo on his desk and thought about his life with Evelyn. They first met in first grade and immediately became good friends. By the time they graduated from school, it was clear that they were a couple. The 2 young men were inseparable, and by the time they left school, they knew marriage was inevitable. Don joined the Air Force, looking forward to graduating under the GA Bill program. His parents instilled in him a strong work ethic, which included the desire to achieve everything himself. The last thing Don wanted was to saddle his parents with a large student loan. Halfway through the service, he proposed and married his longtime girlfriend. It wasn't easy, but they made it through, and after his service, he went to college and got a degree in finance. Evelyn received her associate's degree and became a certified public accountant. Meanwhile, Don took a part-time job at a bank while he finished his studies. A few years later, they had a child, and then a year or so later, they were blessed with a second. Evelyn decided that she needed to be at home to raise her children. By that time, Don had become an assistant manager in the department where he worked and decided that they could live on his salary, which they did. Don continued his career and now worked as a vice president, developing products and services. The goal was to create services and products that would help increase bank revenues while providing customers more value for their money. He was very good at his job, having experience working with bank clients, unlike many empty suits who boast of their degrees but have no experience on the front line. She and Evelyn were still as close as ever, although the sex had dwindled over time. They both loved each other madly, but at 51 they simply could not make love as often as at the beginning of their marriage. Therefore, sex was reduced to twice a week. But they never went to bed arguing and always hugged. Cheating was never on the agenda. He loved her more than life itself and would never hurt her like that. So why, Don wondered, did Evelyn feel the need to do something like that? Was this some kind of midlife crisis? Who knows, but he decided that after this, he would need to talk to her for a very long time. Pat Witherspoon sat in her chair, sipping hot tea and studying the case of Don Williams, vice president of a fairly large national bank. She was scheduled to interview him on Wednesday, and she wanted to know as much as she could before presenting him with the punishment his wife, with her help, of course, had chosen for him. Don seemed to be one of what she called the good guys. This made her happy and sad at the same time. Happy because she knew Evelyn would never have to worry about him cheating, but sad because he would be destroyed by what he was going through. She had no problem punishing cheating husbands. In fact, she even loved it. Her favorite case was an old case in which a doctor surgically removed her husband's special spot. After this, she declared him legally dead and used him as a warm-up for her many lovers. But that didn't last long, as he eventually committed suicide after sending emails to her family, friends and colleagues, exposing her revenge. He also sent a letter full of photos and videos to his family and several law enforcement agencies. She lost her job and her medical license and ended up in prison. Since then, Orvis has made a number of significant changes to ensure that the organization will never again be involved in incidents that lead to death. But this was something different. Don, like Oscar, was not a cheater. He was a hard-working man who loved his wife and family, and by all reports, he was as reliable and loyal as can be. This incident also bothered her. The last time she encountered one of the good guys, he became a federal law enforcement officer determined to destroy her and her organization. Pat recalled the weekend she spent with Renee and her 4 friends. Like Renee, Evelyn needed her help to visualize Don's betrayal. This required help, which Pat was more than happy to provide. One of the methods used by field operators was chemically enhanced hypnosis, which helped women like Renee and Evelyn feel the real pain of infidelity. For them, the betrayal was as real as if it had happened right in front of them. Pat also enjoyed using this technique to shape her clients' marriages into what she considered more suitable. This meant that wives became more dominant, often turning their husbands into weak cuckolds who happily agreed to become whatever she and the wife wanted them to be. Many women, especially young ones, readily accepted this idea. But Evelyn, unlike Renee, completely rejected the idea of changing the dynamics of her marriage. Perhaps this was due to the more than 40 years spent with Don. Renee, on the other hand, was very different and willingly agreed to turn Oscar into a cuckold, willing to sacrifice his masculinity for his wife's sexual pleasure. But that stupid bitch couldn't follow directions. All she had to do was give Oscar 1 drop a day of the drug that Pei provided. But no, she poured half the bottle into his thermos of soup, which could have killed him in a matter of minutes. Naturally, Renee was charged with attempted murder and sentenced to 30 years in prison. The decisive moment was in that damn audio that Oscar recorded while talking to Renee. Luckily, CVD was not associated with this, and nothing was mentioned about hypnosis Renee. Madison didn't need any help since her husband was already a well-known cheater, but she went much further and paid the ultimate price for it. Pat has to admit that she liked what Madison did to her husband. Of course, Mona Larson, the lawyer who founded OVS after her own experience with a cheating husband, was extremely unhappy. After Madison's crimes and connection to OVS became public knowledge, she called Pat to her Washington, D.C. townhouse for a meeting. "What the hell are you doing?" Mona demanded. Pat refused to obey her boss, known to many as the Ice Queen for her cold, calculating toughness in the courtroom. "I am following the plan you created," she said. "No, my plan did not include turning victims into killers. Whose idea was it to invite this woman to defecate on her husband?" "Is this your idea?" Mona asked. "No, it was the client's idea," Pat replied. Fortunately, the contractors refused to do this. "And they did the right thing," Mona said. "Do you have any idea how close you came to completely destroying everything we worked so hard for?" "I'm not responsible for what the client does on his own, and neither are you," Pat said. "I don't care," Mona hissed. "You have no idea how close we have come to our final goal." "What purpose?" asked Pat. "Are you saying that we're running out of cheating husbands to punish? This is not what I see on the field." "No, of course not," Mona said. "We are about to create a nation completely free of white male patriarchy. Soon the country will be dominated by morally superior women, and the days of pandering to men will be over. Women across the country will finally be able to free themselves from the shackles imposed by fascist far-right white male hegemony, and your punctures can destroy all this." "When did politics become a part of this?" asked Pat. "I thought it was all about helping women cope with cheating husbands." "This is Washington, D.C., Pat," Mona said. "Everything here is connected to politics, even the damn time of day." Mona softened a little and pointed Pat to the sofa. Mona sat down opposite her and touched Pat's neck. The next thing Pat knew was waking up on Mona's couch, confused and sleepy. "Wake up," Mona said, smiling. Pat sat up, rubbing her face and eyes. "Sorry I fell asleep," Pat said. Mona waved her hand. "It's okay," Mona said. "It's been a tough few days, and you deserve some rest." "I need you to get ready, Pat. Can you do this for me?" Pat nodded. "Yes, I can, and I apologize." Mona hugged her. "It's okay, Pat. Just focus on the goal, okay?" asked Mona. The meeting ended, but Pat continued to wonder what Mona had done to her. She wondered if Mona was using some kind of control method on her. She did a mental self-examination but found nothing. However, she was still worried, very worried. The next morning, Oscar and a technician from Fort Apache arrived at Don's office. Oscar briefly showed his federal ID at the reception desk and was instantly let in without questions or comment. "Good morning, Oscar," Don said, shaking his hand. Oscar introduced the technician and got down to business. "First of all, Don, I want to thank you for your help. Believe me, this will be the most difficult test of your life," Oscar said. "Let's get started. What should I expect?" Don asked. Oscar began with some preliminary information based on his own experiences with Pat. Don frowned as he listened. His face paled as Oscar described the sadistic punishment Pat forced him to watch. "Do you think I'll have to watch something like that?" he asked. "It's quite possible," Oscar replied. "According to our data, the OVS often leans towards the most humiliating punishments imaginable. Sodomy and pain are often used against their victims. Sometimes this is done by the dominants they hire, sometimes by men. Dave Johnson, the man who was recently killed, was subjected to similar actions. We found several situations in which the husband was crippled to the point that he could no longer function." "Oh my God," Don whispered. "Do you think Evelyn could be part of this? I have known her for more than 40 years, and I can say that there is not a drop of cruelty or malice in her. I would say the same about my Renee, but I suspect that the punishment chosen for you was invented under the influence of some kind of hypnosis," Oscar said. "That's exactly what they did to Renee. According to her, this was done so that she could fully feel the pain of betrayal." "Tell me, Oscar, have you ever cheated on your wife?" Don asked. "No, never, and I would never do that. Even now, I can't bring myself to think about another woman," Oscar replied. Don nodded approvingly. The technician looked at Oscar, indicating that his work was complete. "One last thing, Don," Oscar said. "You'll have to wear this jacket when you meet Pat. It's equipped with a tiny camera, microphone, and GPS so we can track you. Where will the meeting take place?" Don gave him the address, which Oscar recognized immediately. This was the same place where he met Pat. "Remember, Don, stay calm and be yourself. My team and I will be nearby so you'll be safe and our agents will be watching over your home. I doubt they will do anything to you since this is just an initial meeting," Oscar said. "I'll be monitoring the video feed, so when you feel like you can't take it anymore, just tell Pat you've seen enough. I will take this as a signal to act. Any questions?" "Not yet," Don said. "I hope I can handle it." "Easy, Don," Oscar said. "It's not like confronting a Colombian merchant, you know." Don laughed nervously. "One more thing, Don," Oscar added, leaving the office. "If you need to talk to someone after this, call any time." "Thanks, Oscar. I appreciate it," Don said. An hour later, Oscar reported to Bill about his meeting with Don. Bill was pleased with what he heard. "You did a great job on that, Oscar," Bill said, "so don't take it personally." "What?" asked Oscar. "You will receive credit for Pat's arrest, but her interrogation will be handled by others who are, let's say, more experienced in this matter. Besides, considering what you went through with Renee, you wouldn't be a good choice," Bill said. Oscar nodded in understanding. "I understand, Bill. I was just looking forward to putting some pressure on her," Oscar said. "Believe me, you have every right to do this," Bill said. "But remember this, you will be the one handcuffing her." Oscar smiled at this thought. "On the other hand," Bill continued, "we tracked down moles in the Dawes office and the public defender's office. Unfortunately, we will not be able to obtain any information from them." "Why?" asked Oscar. "It turned out that both died under rather mysterious circumstances." One died in a freak car accident, and the other was found dead at the bottom of the stairs leading to her apartment. Of course, no one saw anything, Bill said. Interesting. Do you think this is the work of the Obvies? Asked Oscar. It seems quite obvious to me, but there is no evidence of criminal intent yet, Bill replied. We will also monitor your operation tomorrow. Once Pat is in custody, we will conduct a search of her apartment. This will be quite instructive, and we got a lot of information from your wife's computer. Now we know how Ovids recruits its clients. We still have a lot to sort out. Perhaps we'll get answers after tomorrow's surgery. So why don't you spend the rest of the day with the kids? You have a big day tomorrow, Bill said. Sounds great, Oscar said. See you tomorrow. That evening, after they made love, Don hugged his wife and reflected on the years they had spent together. Evelyn sensed his mood and asked if he was okay. Yes, it's okay, Evie, he said. I was just thinking. Do you realize that we've known each other for almost half a century? Since the very first grade, she answered. You know, besides my dad and our son, you're the only guy I've ever kissed in my life. He knew it. He also remembered the first time she kissed him many years ago. He remembered their first awkward attempts at romance in his car at the local drive-in movie theater and laughed. What's so funny? Asked Evelyn. Are my kisses a joke to you now? Of course not, Evie. I just remembered our dates at the old drive-in movie theater many years ago. How we tried to settle into these cramped seats. Do you remember this? Evelyn laughed. How can I forget this? She answered, laughing. My dad was so glad you bought a car with those seats. He said he wouldn't have to worry about us doing anything we shouldn't anymore. Dawn laughed at the memory. I wonder what he would think of that blanket I kept in the trunk, Dawn asked. He would praise you for being prepared and then knock the wind out of you, Evelyn said. What's happening to us, Evie? Dawn asked. Evelyn sat up, worried. What do you mean? She asked. After all this time, do you really think I'll cheat on you? He asked. No, it's not true, said Evelyn. I'm just, afraid. You are a very handsome man, and I am turning into a middle-aged old woman. I see how young girls look at you. You are so confident, so solid, and I'm just getting old. Dawn hugged Evelyn even tighter. Evie, for me, you are more beautiful now than when we got married. Do you know that you are the only woman I have ever wanted in my life? I will never hurt you or our family. Have you ever thought about sex with someone else? She asked. Well, I had a soft spot for Linda Ronstadt back in the day, Dawn joked. Evelyn punched him in the arm while laughing. But no, I never wanted anyone else. Seriously. You'll be meeting with the Ovs tomorrow, won't you? Asked Evelyn. Yes, Dawn said. Are you feeling okay about this? Asked Evelyn. Not really, Dawn replied. Please don't be angry with me, she begged. Let me get through this meeting first. And then we'll talk, he replied. I love you, Dawn, Evelyn said. He kissed her back. I love you too, Evie. Let's get some sleep. We have a busy day tomorrow. While Dawn and Evelyn were talking, Mona was having her meeting. Thanks to modern technology, her meeting took place online. She gestured to the servant who stood in the doorway holding a fresh cup of hot tea. A man wearing only a loincloth and sandals entered and placed the tea on her table, bowing as he did so. He glanced at her monitors as she waved her hand at him, dismissing him. I see you have a new servant, one of the women said to Monet. Yes, he's pretty new. However, he knows how to make at least a passable cup of tea and is learning how to clean properly, Mona replied with a smile. Isn't that the former congressman from New York who? Began another woman. Yes, that's him, Mona said. Looks like his constituents and his wife didn't need him after he was caught sending sexually explicit messages to his interns last time. They wanted him to leave his post and his wife to trade him for something better. We dealt with his infidelity, and I showed mercy by adding him to my stall here. But why the loincloth? Asked the third woman. There are two reasons, Mona said. Clothing can hide a variety of surveillance devices, and the loincloth reminds him of his place here. Well, said the first woman, I'll have to call you the next time I need a domestic servant." All four women grinned. "Fine. Now to the point," Mona said. "As you all know, the previous government was very supportive of our cause. So much so that we have received billions of taxpayer dollars to fund our work. We were also able to get help in other ways, such as with staff. However, the current administration is completely unresponsive to us. That's why we're taking a bold step. Let me introduce you to our ultimate goal." Mona clicked the mouse several times and brought up a photo of the president. "Are you sure about this?" asked one of the women. "Yes," Mona answered. "It won't be easy, but we're already making progress with the Secret Service thanks to our contacts at the Treasury. Plus, most, if not all, legitimate media are sympathetic to our cause, and they clearly have no love for this man. Plus, Silicon Valley is clearly on our side, so we can shape any story or narrative and Americans will take it at face value. Any other opinion will simply be drowned into oblivion. Once we take control of the White House, we will be able to implement the changes we have been striving for all these years. Before you target someone so powerful, you might want to look into the weak links in your own organization," another woman said. "Yeah, we had to deal with a couple of those weak links recently," Mona said, "and there is another potential weak link. But don't worry, I've already taken care of it. One more puncture, and this link will be completely eliminated." "Make sure of this, Mona," said the first woman. "If you mess this up, it will not only damage the cause, but could also start a civil war." "Don't worry, everything is under control," Mona said. "You better do that," said the other woman. The meeting ended. Mona took a sip of tea, pondering the consequences of what had been said. The next morning was marked by bustle. Oscar and his federal teamed agents were heading to the building where Dawn was to meet with Pat. Luckily, the building was tall enough to have a helipad on its roof, allowing the agents to land, secure their target, and quickly fly it to Fort Apache without interfering with ground traffic. However, teams of agents assembled at all entrances to the building to prevent any possible escape attempt. At the same time, federal agents surrounded Pat's house and eagerly awaited a signal from Oscar. They had already seen her leave the house and informed the main team that the package was on its way. Don left the house after kissing his very nervous wife goodbye. On the outside, he seemed calm, but on the inside, he was trembling. "Lord, don't let me ruin everything," he quietly prayed as he headed to the meeting. Undercover agents monitoring his home told Oscar that Don had moved out. Mona, meanwhile, instructed her new servant, unaware of the brewing storm that would descend upon her longtime friend and collaborator, a woman she and her allies now considered a weak link and a potential threat to the overall plan. Meanwhile, Don arrived at the office building where he was supposed to meet Pat. Oscar warned him to act normal and ignore those he might mistake for federal agents, but it wasn't easy. After all, he was a banker, not a secret agent. He counted to 10, took a few deep breaths, and took the elevator to the 12th floor. Meanwhile, Oscar was waiting with a team of agents in a hole around the corner from the office where Don was to meet Pat. He recognized the door to the office, simply labeled OVS. It was the same door he had walked through a few months ago. He watched the broadcast from a camera attached to Don's jacket, which appeared to be an ordinary button. Another team of agents took up positions at another entrance to the office complex, awaiting a signal from Oscar. Don finally walked to the office door, gathered his courage, and entered. He was met by a woman of about 30. It was Pat. Oscar recognized her immediately, noting that she was dressed in an elegant suit. Of course, she didn't know that she would soon be led away in handcuffs. "You came on time, Mr. Williams. Please follow me," she said in a neutral tone. She clicked the lock on the door leading to the hallway after leading him into her inner office. Oscar signaled to his crew, ordering the crew operating the special ram for such situations to take position. Don looked around at the modest furnishings in the room, a large flat-screen TV next to a small table containing electronic equipment. Pat sat down at the small round conference table in the center of the room. She motioned for Don to sit opposite her. "Can I call you Don?" she asked, using the same script as with Oscar. If you prefer, I can address you as Mr. Williams. My name is Patricia, but you can call me Pat if you want. Call me Don, Pat, he replied. And if possible, tell me something about the OVS. What exactly do you want to know? Asked Pat. What does my wife pay you, and what does she pay you for exactly? Don asked. Your wife, Evelyn, pays us $1,600 for lifelong fidelity insurance. Now that you are here, we will charge your credit card. It should appear on next month's statement, and know that it won't say OVS, she said. Don shook his head and raised his hand. No, you will not charge anything from my card, since I have not approved anything and do not intend to approve anything, depending on what I hear at this meeting, Don said. And if you do make a payment from my card, know that I will take action against you. I don't buy anything without knowing exactly what I'm buying. Perhaps you forgot that I work in a bank. Pat started to defend herself, but then backed down. Okay, Don, I understand. But know that your wife signed an agreement with us, she said. I am not my wife, and I have not seen any agreement, signed or not. You can either continue this meeting or we can end it right now. If I like what you have to offer, I might agree to the deal. If not, you won't get our business. This is how it will be. Your choice, he said. Pat looked confused. Never before had a client's husband taken such a strong position, but she knew that from a legal point of view, he was right. As you wish, Don, she said, but I know that this is very unusual. Your monthly reports, which are not really reports, are unusual. There are many things I have seen in your company that are quite unusual, he said. So what is included in this policy that my wife supposedly agreed to? Evelyn wants you to know exactly what's in her policy and why she took it out, Pat said, sticking to the script. I know you're confused, and I understand that. Before you leave here, you will see the policy she signed, and I will show you a video presentation that will explain everything that is contained in this policy. Experience has shown that the best way to understand the fidelity policy offered by the Mutual Marriage Insurance Society is to explain it as I am going to do now, she said. And believe me, Evelyn knows you're here, and we've fully discussed this, Pat said. Listen, some of what you see may shake you deeply. Feel free to ask questions at any time, and I will try to explain. Pat went on to explain that this mysterious organization is actually a subsidiary of a fictitious company, which in turn is a subsidiary of another fictitious company, and so on. This immediately became a red flag for Dawn. One of the companies, she explained, is registered as private. I won't tell you where it is, but it's not in Boston, despite the sender's address on the envelope, Pat said. The address on the envelope is fiction. We don't do anything illegal, but secrecy is vital given the service we provide to our clients. Don shook his head in disbelief. Do you really force people to agree to such nonsense? He asked. Your entire organization seems to be violating a bunch of rules simply by how it operates. And you want me to give you $1,600? Are you crazy, or do you think I'm an idiot? I warned you that some of what you hear might upset you, and if you decide not to pay for what your wife ordered, I understand. However, please know that our collection service will seek the full amount in cash plus interest from your wife, Pat said. And believe me, our collection service can be, well, pretty aggressive, including physical impact. Are you threatening my wife with violence? Don asked. It seems to me that you have just broken the law, madam. Specifically, the Fair Credit Reporting Act, and to be honest, I've already seen and heard enough. Oscar heard "Don't give the signal" and waved to the agents. He picked up the radio and gave the order. Let's begin. Come on, come on, come on, he shouted. Suddenly, the outer door exploded as the battering ram nearly blew it off its hinges. The back door also gave way when agents burst into the outside office with guns drawn. The door to the inner office also swung open and agents rushed into the room. Pat's eyes widened in shock at the sight of armed federal agents pointing automatic rifles and pistols at her and screaming for her to freeze. She froze. Oscar entered the office, holding his gun at the ready. Patricia Witherspoon, you are under arrest, he said. Don't touch anything. Stand up slowly and place your hands behind your head, interlocking your fingers. Oscar, she began. I'm Officer Warren to you, Miss Witherspoon, he replied. Pat followed his orders. He wasted no time handcuffing her, and the other agents quickly searched the entire office. Oscar deliberately squeezed the handcuffs so that they squeezed her wrists more tightly. This is for Renee, he whispered, tightening the handcuffs even tighter. Pat winced in pain. Hurt? He asked. Pat nodded. Okay, he said. He read her Miranda rights, savoring the moment, and assigned the female agent to conduct the search. Conduct a full search, including body cavities, he ordered the female agent. I don't want her to hide an explosive device in her ass. The agent nodded and conducted a full search. After the search was completed, he smiled at Don. Did great, Don, he said. I really liked the way you handled it. But at least you didn't have to look at the punishment Pat had in store for you, because you guys really get a kick out of this shit. Pat nodded. It's on DVD if you want to watch it. Forgive me, Mr. Williams. Everything I know about you says that you are one of the few who will probably never cheat. Please don't be too angry with your wife, she pleaded. My God, you are sick, he said. Pat looked down, her arrogance gone. Oscar began to lead her out of the office and turned to Don again. I'll contact you, Don. Thanks for your help. And if you want to talk, just call, okay? I've been through it, he said. Don nodded, thanking Oscar. Oscar and his heavily armed team led Pat to the roof, where a helicopter was waiting to take her to Fort Apache. As she took her seat in the helicopter, Oscar pulled out a black hood and placed it over her head, then strapped her tightly into the seat. She started complaining. What the hell are you doing? Where are you taking me? She screamed. Oscar leaned towards her. Shut your mouth before I shut it, or maybe you'll like it, he snapped. The frightened Pat instantly fell silent. This was not the same Oscar she first met. This man, unlike others she had dealt with, frightened her, and for the first time in her life, she truly feared for her life. He sat inside and closed the door. After making sure that all agents were in place and everything from the office was evacuated, he gave the order to return to Fort Apache. At the same time, a battalion of federal agents seemed to descend on Pat's house with military precision. They cleared the building of any possible traps and made sure there were no other surprises, such as armed guards. In a short period of time, the entire house was cleared of everything: furniture, books, computers, clothes, everything. Even the carpet had been removed to make sure nothing was hidden underneath. Everything was bagged, tagged, cataloged, and then packed for transport to Fort Apache. They left as quickly as they arrived, leaving no trace of their presence. Don's head was spinning after the morning's events. He couldn't believe how quickly and efficiently Oscar's team acted. It seemed that they had only been in the office for a few minutes, but in fact almost 2 hours had passed. He was furious at the OBS, at his wife, at this whole unfortunate episode. At least he was spared the need to watch the punishment that would await him if he cheated. He took the phone and called home. Evelyn answered after the first ring. Dawn, she asked nervously. Yes, it's me, he said. Can we talk? She asked. Not now, Evelyn, he said, deliberately avoiding her pet name. Actually, I think you should spend a couple of days at your sister's. I have a lot to think about, and to be honest, I'm not ready to meet you yet. Evelyn started crying. Forgive me, honey, please don't hate me, she begged through tears. Evelyn, please. I have a headache, and I'm not thinking clearly right now. It'll be a while before I get home, and I really think it's best that you're gone when I get back, he said. Oh God, she sobbed. Are you going to leave me? Please don't do this. I can't live without you, Dawn. Just for a couple of days, Evelyn. I need to calm down and think things through. I won't make any drastic decisions until we talk, okay? I just need this time to think, he said. Okay, Dawn, Evelyn said between sobs. I'll wait as long as necessary. Just please don't leave me and don't hate me. I won't be able to survive this. I don't hate you, Evelyn. I'm upset, I'm shocked, but I don't hate you, and I won't leave until we talk about it. But I need this time to think, he said. You didn't say you loved me, Evelyn said. Please tell me you still love me. Okay, Evelyn, I love you, you know it. Just give me some space for a couple of days. I'll call you at your sister's. Sorry, Dawn, of course, I'll give you space. Just please give me a chance to fix everything. We'll talk soon, Evelyn, Dawn said. Tell your sister hi for me, okay? Okay, Dawn, and please remember that I love you with all my heart, she said. Me too, Dawn said. Bye, Evelyn. Bill watched as the helicopter landed on the site of the fortified outpost. Oscar came out, pulling Pat out of the seat, and led her to the elevator that would take her to the underground cell. The hood remained on her head until the elevator stopped. He casually tossed her into a tiny cell where female guards replaced her civilian clothes with an orange hospital gown that was open at the back. Pat was left completely naked except for a robe and a pair of rubber slippers. The guard strapped her to a chair in the center of the cell. She remained in the stool except for a few hours when she was allowed to sleep and at scheduled times when she was allowed to relieve herself. When can I talk to my lawyer? She asked the guard, who seemed to be in charge. Nobody gave you permission to talk, bitch, the head guard said. Let me explain the rules to you. Rule 1, you speak only when you are spoken to and only after you have received permission. Rule 2, if you want to speak, you ask permission. Rule 3, what my guards and I say must be followed. No exceptions. You eat when and what we say. You defecate when we tell you to. You'll be asleep when we say so. You address the guards exclusively as Madam. You have no name here except the one we give you. Right now your designation is bitch. Did you understand these rules? Yes, Pat answered. The guard came closer. What bitch? Asked the guard. Yes, madam, Pat answered. Allow me to speak, madam, she added. Speak up, bitch, the guard said. When can I see my lawyer, madam? Asked Pat. It depends on the investigators. When they decide that you can talk to a lawyer, they will inform us. Then we will inform you. Got it, bitch. Yes, madam, Pat answered. Bill and Oscar stood aside while the guards finished their work. Good job, Oscar, Bill said. I heard you really enjoyed cuffing her. Yes, I liked it, said Oscar. Maybe even too much. Now you understand why you won't participate in the interrogation, Bill said. Yes, you were right, as always. Listen, Bill said. You're not completely out of the game. Perhaps you can help us motivate her to cooperate. I will give you some leeway, but no unnecessary physical force, and lethal force only as a last resort. Understood? Got it, Oscar replied. He already had an idea, and he was going to implement it as soon as possible, which just happened to be 2 hours after the first interrogation. Get up, bitch, the guard ordered. Pat stood up after the chair was released from its straps. Move, the guard ordered, leading her to the door where Oscar stood. Oscar put the hood back on her and, together with the guard, led her to the elevator. When they reached the top floor, Oscar and the guard led her to a small electric vehicle that looked a lot like a golf cart. Oscar got in and started the car. Let me talk, Pat asked timidly. Speak up, bitch, Oscar and the guard said simultaneously. They both smiled at this. Where are we going? Where are we going, bitch? Asked Oscar. Where are we going, sir? Pat asked, stumbling over the word sir. We're going to introduce you to some of your victims, Oscar said. Tell me, bitch, have you ever seen the consequences of your work? No, sir, Pat said quietly. Well, I think it's time to fix it. Don't you agree, officer? Oscar asked, looking at the guard. She nodded in agreement. Yes, sir, Officer Warren, I think so, the guard said. What do you think, bitch? Yes, sir, madam, I think so, Pat replied. Oscar was pleased. He drove up to the hospital, parked, and signaled to the security guard. Pick it up, officer, he ordered. The guard obeyed, and soon all three found themselves on the floor, where the men who had survived the punishment of the OVS were located. Look at this, bitch. Look carefully at what you have done, Oscar said. Pat walked along the corridor, looking into the windows where the men were, destroyed by what had been done to them. Several men recoiled in horror when they saw her. Some screamed. Others tried to grab her. "Allow me to speak, sir," she asked, looking at Oscar. "Speak up, bitch," he barked. "They are cheaters. They deserved what they got." "Sir," she said defiantly. "Some of them, yes. But that doesn't give you or anyone else the right to do what you did to them." "Think about this guy," Oscar said, pointing to one of the closed doors. He took a folder out of the drawer next to the door and looked into it. "James Madison. Do you remember him?" "Probably not. He met his cousin at the Marriott Hotel. She was going on vacation, and he was at a conference. They had not seen each other for many years and wanted to reconnect. He bought her dinner, gave her a bracelet, and they went their separate ways. The next day, he was taken to the hospital emergency room injured. Somewhere along the way, he had a heart attack and almost died. And there are a lot of guys like that here who have gone through the same thing," Oscar said. "And there are people like me, men who have never cheated or even thought about cheating. But you decided to destroy their marriages by forcing their wives to agree to turn them into eunuchs and weak cuckolds. That's what you wanted from Renee, isn't it?" Pat said nothing, looking down. Oscar was clearly angry. "Isn't it?" he shouted. "Answer me, damn it." "Yes, sir," she said, crying. "So tell me, bitch, who the hell gave you or anyone else the right to do this? Answer me." "I was just doing my job, sir," she replied. "So you would be pleased if I decided to open these doors and give these men, the men you destroyed, the opportunity to get even with you for 5 or 10 minutes. What do you think? Answer me." "It won't fit on your badge," Pat said. Oscar took off his badge and put it in his pocket. "Don't think of me as a federal agent, bitch. Think of me as a husband and father seeking to bring justice. Is that better for you?" Pat's eyes widened in fear. "You see, you never thought about the children of those men you destroyed, isn't it?" "Of course not. But we have to deal with them too. How would you like to explain to the children of these men why you took it upon yourself to destroy their families?" "But," Pat began. Oscar interrupted her, exasperated. "But nothing, bitch. You did something to these men that you had no right to do. You destroyed their families, and then you destroyed them. And by the way, you helped kill a lot of people. Yes, kill. And don't tell me you were just doing your job. You liked it, didn't you? Answer me, bitch." "Yes, sir, I loved it," Pat said, crying. "Please stop, sir." "Bitch, your punishment is just beginning," Oscar said. "But if you really want to start making amends, you can tell us everything we want to know and accept your punishment. Are you ready to do this?" Tears streamed down Pat's cheeks, and she nodded. "Yes, sir, I will do everything I can to correct the situation. I didn't know it was that bad. Please believe me," she said. "Okay," said Oscar. Maybe she really did repent, he thought. "You can start by apologizing to these men. Will you do it?" "Yes, sir," Pat replied. She looked back at the faces in the windows, looking at her with hatred. "Please believe me. I'm so sorry this happened to you. I was just doing my job and really didn't know it was that bad. I was told there would be no long-term scars or consequences. I remember you telling me this. I couldn't believe you actually thought something like that wouldn't scar you for life," Oscar said, shaking his head. He looked at the guard. "Take her back to her cell, officer." The guard put a hood on Pat and took her back to her cell. Oscar pulled out his phone and called his friend. "Hi, Oscar," Bill said. "So you convinced Pat to work with us?" "I think she'll be more accommodating now," Oscar replied. "Nothing motivates more than realizing the consequences of your actions." "You may be right, my friend," Bill said. "By the way, we have already received a lot of information from her computer. You were right, she used chemically enhanced hypnosis on Renee. Your ex-wife didn't stand a chance. Once Pat planted the idea in her mind, it was all over. This could significantly change the course of her case in court. I've already given the information to her lawyer." Pat also used this technique on Don Williams' wife, but couldn't convince Mrs. Williams to do what Renee did. "We have also received information that may relate to a possible attack on the president. I'll tell you about it later. In the meantime, I think you should meet Mr. Williams and then visit Renee." "Great idea, Bill. Thanks for letting me know," Oscar said and hung up. Mona was unhappy that Pat was no longer in contact. She knew her most experienced field agent had been arrested, but she had no idea where Pat was being held. None of her informants in the legal system had information. It was as if Pat had disappeared from the face of the earth. This was unacceptable. She sent a message to the man who was supposed to be her lawyer. The next time you see Pat, give her this message word for word. Your services are no longer required. Consider it done, was the reply. Mona sipped her tea as she thought about her next steps. Pat's arrest was a major leak, but she was confident that no one would be able to obtain meaningful data from her computer. Firstly, most likely, this is done by men, and secondly, law enforcement agencies in our time simply do not have the necessary skills to find something important. However, Pat's arrest derailed her original plan. She sent a message to the 3 women she had spoken to earlier. Urgent meeting. It's an important matter. Within minutes, the women were discussing their options via a secure messaging platform. Mona made her final decision. Lady, we have to go into the shadows. Not forever, just for a couple of months until things calm down. I'll send a message throughout the company. Applications will be filed and action will be taken on these applications. But we will not be taking on any new clients, and the operation we talked about earlier will be postponed. I will be taking a well-deserved break at an undisclosed location, but will be in touch when I feel it is safe to do so. Any questions? All women agreed, and only one question was asked. Will you take your new servant with you? Asked one of the women. Mona smiled and shook her head. No, he won't accept where I'm going. Why do you want him? She asked. Perhaps, answered the other woman. Can I at least use it while you're gone? Of course, Mona said. I will arrange for its delivery as soon as possible. Well, if there are no more questions, lady, it's time for me to get down to business. The 4 women said goodbye, and the meeting ended. Meanwhile, Pat finally received permission to contact the OVD's lawyer through a supervised Skype session. As Oscar and the guard watched, the lawyer gave her a simple message from Mona. Your services are no longer required. They watched as Pat suddenly slapped her neck as if trying to kill a mosquito. After a few seconds, she fell into a chair, her pupils dilated. Before Oscar realized what had happened, Pat was dead. Doctors rushed to her cell and quickly took her body for an autopsy, where it was revealed that a capsule of poison had been very carefully placed next to her carotid artery. When Pat slapped her neck, the capsule ruptured, releasing the fast-acting poison into her bloodstream. Within seconds, Pat was dead. So, Oscar thought, Pat had paid the ultimate price. But the game is far from over. The information that Bill and the forensic team extract from her computer will have a significant impact on the eventual destruction of OVDs. However, one final message was left on Pat's computer. The lights went out. No one knew exactly what this meant, but they were pretty sure that it was an indication that the OVDs was going underground, at least for a while. Don't worry, Oscar, Bill said. The OVDs may go into the shadows for a while, but our work is not finished. There are still many suffering men. Do yourself and your kids a favor. Which? Asked Oscar. Get out of town for a while, okay? Oscar smiled widely. He knew what to do. Of course, Bill. Thank you. Oscar had a few more things to do. He called Don and suggested they have a beer. Don agreed. Here's a DVD of what they would do to you if you cheated, Oscar said. Don took the disc and put it in his jacket pocket. I don't think I'll ever watch this, Oscar, but thanks anyway, he said. Do you already know what you will do with Evelyn? Asked Oscar. You know, she was under the influence of chemically enhanced hypnosis at that moment. She was out of her mind because of Pat. Trust me, Don, it's not worth destroying your family. Are you saying that Evelyn didn't come up with all this herself? Don asked, holding the DVD. Oscar shook his head. No, Don, not herself, said Oscar. Don's eyes filled with tears. Thank God, he said. I was so close to divorcing her. Thanks for telling me. Please, Don, Oscar said. No offense, Oscar, but as much as I love beer, I really need to make one call, Don said, holding up the phone. Oscar smiled and shook his hand. "No offense, Don. Good luck and call anytime," Oscar said. Don ran out of the bar and called Evelyn's sister. He asked to call his wife. "Don, is everything okay?" asked Evelyn. "Evie, I think it's time for us to talk," Don said. "Is it true?" asked Evelyn. "I missed you, Evie. And today I learned that you were not yourself on that trip with Renee. I love you, Evie. I need you to come home, if that's okay," he said. "Oh God, yes, Don," she said, crying. "I'll arrive so quickly that your head will spin. I love you, Don, and I promise that from now on I will talk to you before I do anything stupid." And a new chapter began in the Williams marriage. Oscar had one more thing to do: a visit to a women's prison. "Hi, Renee," he said as his ex-wife sat down across from him. "I just wanted to let you know that Pat is dead." Renee's eyes widened. "Yes, I arrested her, helped her realize what she had done, but in the end she killed herself. We also learned that you were under the influence of a special type of hypnosis. You didn't realize what you were doing. This can have a significant impact on what your lawyer does. Do you think they can release me?" she asked. "I don't know, Renee," said Oscar. "But now I at least understand that you were not in control of your actions." Renee's eyes filled with tears. "Do you think we have a chance to try again?" she asked. "We'll see," Oscar replied. "Let your lawyer do his job, and then we'll see what happens next, okay?" "Okay," she replied. "Thank you for not rejecting me right away, Oscar. I know how difficult it is. So what are you and the kids going to do now that you've slain the dragon?" Oscar smiled widely. "We're going to Disneyland," he exclaimed with a laugh. "Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one. Click to the next one. Click to the next one.